Imagine, my wife offered me an open relationship, and I took advantage of it to take revenge on this traitor. But let's get into this story gradually. So, where do I even start? Melanie and I had been married for over a decade, and things were fine, I guess. Not bad, not great, just steady. You know how it goes. Routines, work, bills, maybe a movie on a Friday night if we're feeling wild. But, of course, fine wasn't good enough for Melanie. Apparently, fine is just another word for boring, at least according to her. And that's where this whole mess started. We hadn't had that passionate fire in a while. Yes, sex was less frequent. I'm not gonna lie, but I never thought it was a big deal. Honestly, I didn't think anything was wrong. Guess I missed the crisis memo she had sent to her own brain. At first, she dropped little hints here and there, subtle crap like, "Don't you think our lives could use a little more excitement? Or wouldn't it be fun to spice things up?" I shrugged most of it off, figuring she was talking about like a vacation or trying a new hobby together. Stuff normal couples do. Then, one night, she hits me with this bombshell. We're sitting on the couch, half watching some Netflix series when she goes, "Jake, I've been thinking, what if we opened up our marriage?" I swear I thought I'd misheard her. Or maybe she was joking. An open marriage? Like sleep with other people and just talk about it over dinner? I'm not a prude or anything, but come on. This was Melanie, the woman who used to get jealous when a waitress smiled at me. And now, out of nowhere, she's pitching the idea of banging other dudes? I was floored. All I could get out was a stunned, "What the hell are you talking about?" But she was dead serious, laying out this whole speech like she'd been rehearsing it for weeks. "It's about trying something new, bringing excitement back into our lives," she said. "We'd still be committed to each other, but we'd have the freedom to explore, intimately." Yeah, intimately. She said that word like it was a menu item at a fancy restaurant, not the nuclear option for our marriage. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My brain was spinning. All I could think was, has she met someone already? Is there some guy in her life who's convinced her that this is a good idea? I started grilling her with questions. Is this about someone else? Who have you been talking to? Are you cheating on me already? But Melanie just sat there, cool as ice, deflecting every question like a pro. "No, Jake, it's not like that. I just think it's something that could be healthy for us. A way to grow together." Grow together. Sure, because nothing says teamwork like sharing your spouse with strangers. Our conversations got more heated after that. Anytime I tried to bring it up, Melanie would shut me down, act like I was the crazy one for not being open-minded. She'd twist my words, make me feel like I was some old-fashioned caveman who couldn't get with the times. And let me tell you, every time she called me closed off or said I was afraid of change, it was like she was chiseling away at everything I thought our marriage stood for. I didn't know who to talk to about it. It's not exactly the kind of thing you bring up at a barbecue, So I turned to my best friend, Luke. I told him the whole story, expecting him to be on my side, to say, "Yeah, man, that's messed up." But instead, he hit me with some new age crap about how a lot of couples are doing it these days, and how maybe I should just try to see things from Melanie's perspective. It could be an adventure, he said. An adventure. Yeah, like skydiving without a parachute. The worst part was that Melanie started acting like nothing had happened. She'd talk about this open marriage thing like it was a done deal, like we'd already agreed. She'd say stuff like, "Once we get into the swing of it, you'll see how good it is for us. We'll be closer. Trust me." And she'd have this infuriating smile on her face, like she was handing me some kind of twisted gift. I felt like I was the one losing my mind. It didn't help that she became more distant and preoccupied with herself. She'd spend hours in front of the mirror before work, picking out clothes that she never bothered with before. She'd get home late, claiming she was working overtime or grabbing drinks with colleagues. And all the while, she kept pushing this narrative that this was the way forward for us, the way to save our marriage. It was like living with a stranger who'd hijacked my wife's body, and every word she said felt like a dagger. There were nights where I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering where everything had gone wrong. Was I really such a terrible husband? Did I miss the signs for years? Or was she just bored of me? Part of me wanted to grab her, shake her, and scream, How did we get here? But another part of me, a smaller and quieter part, was just tired. Tired of trying to figure out what the hell she wanted. Tired of feeling like nothing I did was good enough. And the worst part? Knowing that no matter how much I pleaded, argued, or reasoned, Melanie was going to do whatever she wanted, with or without my approval. You ever try to convince yourself of something you know, deep down, is complete and utter bullshit? That's what I did. I spent weeks walking around like a zombie, replaying Melanie's words in my head over and over. I didn't want to agree to this open relationship crap. It felt like selling my soul to keep the peace. But at the same time, I was desperate to hold on to any piece of normalcy I could still find. I catch myself thinking, maybe I'm the one who's outdated. Maybe this is how marriages are supposed to evolve. Yeah, I know. Pathetic, right? Eventually, I caved. I don't even know how it happened. Maybe I just got tired of fighting, or maybe Melanie wore me down with her endless "we need this" speeches. One night I told her, fine, if this is what you want, then we'll try it. She was over the moon, of course, acting like I'd just agreed to a weekend getaway, not the complete deconstruction of our marriage. She wrapped her arms around me, kissed me, and whispered, "You won't regret this." The irony? That was the first time she'd touched me like that in months. It made me feel used, like she was playing a game, and I was just a pawn that finally moved the way she wanted. So I tried to play the role of the modern man, pretending that I was open to the idea, that I was all for it. But inside, it felt like something was rotting away. Every day, I woke up with a pit in my stomach, some combination of fear, anger, and self-loathing. But I tried to hide it. I wanted to be the guy who could go along with this, who could be cool with the new rules. I kept telling myself that maybe this would work, maybe it'd save what we had left. Except it didn't. It just made things worse. Melanie changed practically overnight. It was like she was suddenly seeing the world through a different lens, one where I didn't even exist. She started putting more effort into her appearance. Suddenly, she was going out of her way to look stunning. And I don't mean just put together, I mean full-on seductress vibes. Tight dresses, perfect hair, makeup that screamed, "Look at me." I'd watch her leave the house, and instead of thinking, "Wow, my wife looks gorgeous," I'd think, "Who the hell is she trying to impress?" I noticed the late nights too. She started coming home later and later, always with some lame excuse. Work went long, or the girls and I grabbed a drink. But the excuses were so flimsy, it made me wonder if she even cared enough to lie properly. There were times when she'd waltz in, smile plastered on her face, and act like nothing was wrong. Ask me about my day like we were still that happy couple from years ago. I could barely look at her. It didn't take long for the suspicion to settle in. My gut was screaming at me, and I couldn't ignore it. There was no way this was all innocent fun. I knew Melanie well enough to sense when she was lying. The way she'd glance away when I asked about her day, the fake cheeriness in her voice. It was all a front, and it was all for someone else. She was seeing someone, I was sure of it. But I needed proof. I needed to see it with my own eyes before I did something crazy, like confront her and end up looking like an insecure fool. So I did what any desperate guy would do. I followed her. One Wednesday night, I told her I was working late. She nodded, barely paying attention as she got ready for another night out with the girls. I sat in my car, parked a few blocks away, and watched. She walked out of the house looking like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. My stomach turned. I gave her a head start, and then I tailed her, staying back far enough so she wouldn't notice. She drove across town, and soon enough, I found myself parked outside a fancy restaurant, the kind we hadn't been to in years. And there he was, some guy, waiting for her by the door. Tall, cocky smile, like he was God's gift to the world. I watched as Melanie practically floated into his arms, greeting him with a hug that lasted a little too long. And the way they looked at each other, God, it felt like a punch to the gut. You know how you can tell when two people have that chemistry, that unspoken connection? Yeah, that's what I saw. She was giggling, twirling her hair, leaning in close as they talked. It was like I wasn't even a part of her life anymore. I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. A part of me wanted to storm in there, flip the table, drag Melanie out by her arm, and make a scene for everyone to see. But I didn't. I just sat there, watching as they shared a meal, sipped wine, and acted like they were the only two people in the world. When she came home later that night, she had the audacity to waltz in with this smile on her face. "Hey babe," she said, like everything was peachy. Like she hadn't just spent the last 3 hours swooning over some guy while I sat there, losing my mind. And I couldn't take it anymore. I didn't have the patience to play it cool or pretend I was okay with this crap. "Where the hell were you?" I spat out, unable to keep the venom from my voice. She gave me that rehearsed look of surprise, like I'd just asked the dumbest question in the world. "I told you, Jake. I was out with the girls." "Bullshit," I snapped. "You were with some guy. I saw you." The way her face fell, it was like she hadn't expected to get caught so soon. But she recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing as she got defensive. "Are you following me now?" "Jesus, Jake, what's your problem? We agreed to try this. You can't accuse me of cheating when we have an open marriage." "An open marriage." She said it like it was some magical past that made all this okay. As if the minute I'd reluctantly nodded my head, it meant she could go out and screw around with whoever she wanted, no questions asked. I felt my anger boiling over, spilling out into the air around us. Open doesn't mean sneaking around behind my back. I never agreed to this. Her expression changed, harder, colder. "Maybe you should make up your mind about what you actually want, Jake. Because this back and forth crap isn't working. You're either in or you're out." And there it was, a challenge, a dare to call her bluff, to end things once and for all if I couldn't handle her adventure. But I wasn't ready to make that decision. Not yet. So instead, I just stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me, leaving Melanie standing there with that same smug look on her face, the look that said she was winning whatever sick game she thought we were playing. After that explosive fight with Melanie, I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't just sit there and let her play me for a fool. I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. My wife cozying up to some dude while I sat in the parking lot like a dumbass. I was angry, humiliated, and completely sick of pretending to be the understanding husband. You ever have that moment when you decide you've had enough? When something snaps inside and you're just done trying to make sense of the madness? Yeah, that was me. I started thinking about how to turn the tables, to make her feel some of the pain she was dishing out. And what better way than to use her own twisted idea against her? "Fine, you want an open relationship? Let's see how you handle it when I'm the one having some fun." The idea felt dirty, sure, but the thought of seeing Melanie's face when she realized she wasn't the only one who could play this game, it kept me going. I threw myself into the dating scene, hoping to find someone who would be up for a little mischief. But it's not as easy as it sounds. Turns out, married life doesn't exactly prepare you for jumping back into the single world. At first, it was awkward. I was that guy at the bar, looking way out of place, fumbling through small talk with strangers. And don't even get me started on dating apps. Half of them seemed like scams, and the rest just made me feel out of my element. Every profile I swiped through was a reminder of how long it had been since I was out there. But I was determined. For weeks, I hit up bars, hung out at happy hours, chatted up women online, all while Melanie continued her adventures. It became a sick race to see who could open up the most, even if I wasn't honest about it. Still, it felt like I was trudging through mud. Most women were either freaked out by the idea of getting involved with a married guy, or they'd ghost me the minute they learned about the open marriage thing. Not that I blame them. The whole situation reeked of drama. Then I met Samantha. I was about ready to give up when I found her on some app. Her profile was blunt. Nothing serious, just looking for a good time. I shot her a message, not expecting much, but we ended up clicking. She had this no-nonsense attitude, a sharp wit, and an easy laugh that felt refreshing compared to the whirlwind my life had become. We started chatting every day, and soon enough, we met up for drinks. Samantha was different. She had this confidence that was hard to ignore, like she didn't care what people thought. And when I told her about Melanie and the whole open relationship disaster, she didn't flinch. In fact, she leaned in, eyes bright with curiosity, and asked for all the details, what led up to it, how it made me feel, all of it. It was like she found the whole thing fascinating, like my mess of a marriage was some kind of juicy soap opera. I didn't know whether to be relieved or embarrassed. "Let me get this straight," she said, swirling her drink as she processed everything. "Your wife wants an open marriage, but then gets pissed off when you have a problem with her going out with some guy?" "Pretty much," I muttered, feeling a mix of shame and frustration. Samantha chuckled, shaking her head. "Sounds like she wants all the fun without any of the consequences." Typical. That's when she dropped the idea. The crazy, brilliant, reckless idea that would turn everything upside down. "Why don't you let her taste her own medicine?" she suggested, leaning forward with a mischievous grin. "Invite me over. Introduce me as your special friend. Then we'll just see how she reacts when things get cozy between us." She raised an eyebrow, waiting for my response. I was stunned. The audacity of it all. It was exactly the kind of chaos that Melanie had brought into our lives. And here I was being given a golden opportunity to shove it right back in her face. But I hesitated. I wasn't sure if I could go through with something like that. I mean, sure, I was angry, furious, even, but was I really the kind of guy who'd stoop to this level? And what would it solve, anyway? "Don't overthink it," Samantha said, sensing my hesitation. "You're not doing anything wrong. She opened this door. She can't be mad when you walk through it. Besides, I don't mind helping out. Seems like you could use a win for once." A win. That's what it felt like. Honestly, finally getting the upper hand in a situation where I'd felt powerless for so long. After all, Melanie had practically dared me to go out and live this open lifestyle. So why not give her what she wanted? Or at least what she said she wanted. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If this was the game she wanted to play, then maybe it was time for me to play to win. So I agreed. We kept meeting up in the following weeks, me and Samantha. It started out casual, just drinks, talking, the occasional kiss. But as we spent more time together, the lines between revenge and something more started to blur. It felt nice, liberating even, like I was finally getting some of my dignity back. And Samantha? She was all in, completely up for the ride. She'd tease me about how things would go down, make jokes about the look on Melanie's face when she'd walk in and find us together. The plan was simple. I'd invite Samantha over for a small get-together, just her, me, and a few other friends. Then, when the time was right, I'd make my move, put my arm around Samantha, kiss her in front of Melanie, and watch the fireworks explode. It was all set up to be this big moment of revelation, a dramatic confrontation where I'd expose Melanie's hypocrisy for everyone to see. But as the day got closer, I started to get cold feet. Was this really me? Was I actually going to go through with it? Sure, Melanie deserved to be called out, but was I really going to make a public spectacle of our marriage falling apart? Every time I thought about it, I'd flip-flop between feeling like a badass Avenger and a complete scumbag. And yet, I couldn't deny the thrill of it. The idea of finally taking back some control, of standing up for myself, and showing Melanie that I wasn't just going to roll over and take her crap, it was intoxicating. The day of the party arrived, and I was a nervous wreck. Melanie didn't suspect a thing. She left the house that morning like everything was normal, while I stayed behind to get everything ready. Samantha showed up early, looking stunning, of course, and ready to play her part. I could see it in her eyes, the excitement, the anticipation. And honestly, it was contagious. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in the driver's seat, like I had a say in how this story would end. When Melanie finally walked through the door, I was ready to watch her perfect little world crumble, ready to make her face the consequences of her freedom. And Samantha? She was ready too, right by my side, playing her role to perfection. But as soon as Melanie walked in, I realized something. No matter how much I prepared, nothing could have truly readied me for what was about to go down. The plan was set in motion, and as the hours ticked by, my nerves were on fire. I'd gone over the scenario 1,000 times in my head. Melanie walks in, sees me with Samantha, chaos erupts. But when the moment actually came, nothing could prepare me for what it felt like to face it all head on. It was like a train hurtling toward a crash, and I was standing right on the tracks, daring it to hit me. The party started off pretty tame. A few friends came over, beers in hand, casual laughter filling the living room. But it all felt like background noise. The only thing on my mind was what was going to happen when Melanie walked through that door. And Samantha, man, she played her part well. She was flirty, fun, magnetic. We shared glances across the room, little touches, knowing smiles. To everyone else, we were just two people vibing, maybe a little too friendly for a married guy, but nothing crazy. But to me, this was a game of high stakes. A game where I either win it all or lose whatever dignity I had left. Then it happened. I heard the keys jingling at the front door, and time seemed to slow down. Melanie stepped in, looking like she always did after work. Confident, a bit tired, but totally unsuspecting. For a split second, she wore this expression of surprise, like she'd forgotten I was having people over. And then she saw Samantha. She didn't blow up right away. That's what caught me off guard. Melanie's a smart woman. She doesn't just dive in without testing the waters. So instead of marching over and making a scene, she gave me this tight-lipped smile and walked around the room, saying her hellos, trying to act like she was cool with everything. It was almost impressive, the way she kept her composure. Almost. But I knew better. I saw the way her eyes flickered when she looked at Samantha. Cold, sizing her up, trying to figure out who this stranger was and why she was all over her husband. It was like watching a volcano on the verge of erupting, and all I could do was poke it a little harder. When Melanie finally made her way over to us, she gave me this fake, sugary smile and asked, "So, aren't you going to introduce me to your friend?" The tension was electric. You could feel the crackle in the air as she glared at Samantha, trying to make sense of this woman in her house. "Oh, this is Samantha," I said, trying to keep my voice casual, like this was all completely normal. She's my date for the night." I threw that word out there like a live grenade, knowing exactly how Melanie would take it. And it hit her like a punch to the gut. For a moment, her face went pale, like she couldn't process what she'd just heard. But she recovered fast, too fast, and forced a laugh like it was all some kind of joke. "Oh really? Your date?" she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "So, this is what an open relationship looks like to you." Samantha, bless her, didn't miss a beat. She leaned in closer to me, her hand sliding up my arm as she gave Melanie this cheeky, knowing smile. "Well, Jake did say you were the one who suggested it," Samantha said, batting her eyelashes like she was in on some great secret. "I have to say, I think it's such a progressive idea." And that was it. The spark that lit the whole thing up. Melanie's face twisted into a sneer, and all that fake calmness shattered in an instant. "What the hell is this, Jake? You think it's funny to bring some slut into our home? Do you think humiliating me like this is some kind of game?" I knew she'd explode, but seeing it happen, feeling the fury behind every word, made my heart pound in my chest. But I stayed calm. Calmer than I ever thought I'd be in a moment like this. "I'm just playing by the rules, Mel. You're the one who wanted an open relationship, remember? Well, here I am, trying to make it work." The look in her eyes was pure, unfiltered rage. She opened her mouth to say something, but the words seemed to die on her lips, like she couldn't find a way to spit them out without choking on her own anger. And that's when Samantha made her move. She turned to me, wrapped her arms around my neck, and kissed me. Hard. And it wasn't just any kiss. It was a full-on, passionate, no-holds-barred kiss that left nothing to the imagination. Melanie's reaction was instant. She let out this noise, half scream, half sob, and shoved the coffee table so hard that the drinks went flying. "You piece of shit," she yelled, her voice breaking. "I knew you were pathetic, but I didn't think you'd stoop this low." I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, like I'd finally flipped the script and made her see just how messed up this whole situation was. But it didn't feel good. Not really. Watching her storm out of the house, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, I didn't feel like I'd won anything. It just felt hollow, like all the pain and anger had led to this one ugly moment, and now there was nothing left. After Melanie was gone, the party kind of fizzled out. Our friends, clearly uncomfortable, made their excuses and left, leaving me and Samantha alone in the living room. She looked at me with this knowing smile, like she could read every thought running through my head. "That was intense," she said softly, brushing a hand through her hair. "You okay?" I let out a long, shaky breath, not sure how to answer that question. Was I okay? No, not really. I was a mess of emotions, relief, regret, anger, sadness. But one thing I did know, I wasn't sorry for what I'd done. Melanie had pushed me to my breaking point, and I'd finally pushed back. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I think I needed to do that." Samantha walked over and put her arms around me, pulling me close. It felt good to be held, to feel someone's warmth after everything that had gone down. She looked up at me with those bright, playful eyes and said, "Well, if it helps, you did great." And then she kissed me again, slower this time, with a tenderness that felt like a balm over all the chaos. We ended up on the couch, wrapped up in each other, and for the first time in a long while, I let myself relax. Let myself feel something other than pain and anger. And when Samantha whispered, "Why don't we go upstairs?" I didn't hesitate. I needed this. Needed to lose myself in someone else, to feel like I was finally breaking free from the nightmare my marriage had become. The sex was intense, like all the tension and rage from the past weeks were finally released in one wild, passionate night. And yeah, it felt like freedom, a kind of reckless, dangerous freedom that I knew wouldn't last. But for those few hours, with Samantha's body pressed against mine, with her breath hot on my skin, I felt alive again. Like maybe, just maybe, I could come out the other side of this mess in one piece. The morning after the party, reality hit like a ton of bricks. It was that awful kind of clarity, the kind that only comes when the anger fades and you're left staring at the mess you've made. Melanie was gone. Not just out for a walk or a drive, but completely no texts, no calls, nothing. And I knew why. Last night had crossed a line, one we couldn't come back from. The thrill of revenge had been replaced by a sinking feeling, like I'd finally put the last nail in the coffin of our marriage. I spent the next few days in a fog, replaying the whole thing in my head. The kiss, the screaming, the slam of the door. I couldn't get Melanie's face out of my mind. How she looked when she realized what was happening, the raw fury and hurt in her eyes. And as much as I hated to admit it, I felt guilty. Guilty for putting on that show, guilty for dragging Samantha into it, guilty for being the man I never wanted to become. But at the same time, a part of me knew it was only the inevitable end of something that had already died. When Melanie finally came back, it wasn't with some apology or olive branch. No. She came in like a storm, demanding that we talk. I could tell by the look in her eyes that there was no going back to normal, no fixing what was broken. Her expression was sharp, every word dripping with contempt. "So this is who you are now, huh?" she spat out as soon as she walked in. "Some pathetic asshole who needs to put on a show to feel like a man?" I tried to stay calm, but the anger flared up just as quickly. "Don't you dare turn this around on me, Melanie. I did what you asked. This is what you wanted, remember? An open relationship? Or was that just an excuse to screw around behind my back?" "Oh, don't act all innocent," she shot back, practically shaking with rage. "You didn't have to do that. Bringing her here, flaunting it in my face. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "Humiliating?" I yelled, finally losing it. "How the hell do you think I felt for months, Melanie? You think it's easy knowing my wife is out with some other guy, pretending it's all for the good of our marriage? Give me a break. You got what you asked for, and now you can't handle it." It was like we were speaking two different languages, and every word just fueled the fire. We shouted over each other, voices raised, cutting each other down with every chance we got. She accused me of being insecure, of ruining what could have been a beautiful new chapter for us. I threw her lies right back at her, calling her out for turning our marriage into some sick experiment. All the pent-up anger, all the resentment we'd both been carrying, it all came pouring out, louder and uglier than I'd ever imagined. By the end of it, we were both out of breath, standing there like boxers after the final round, neither willing to back down. And then came the silence, the deafening realization that there was nothing left to say. Maybe we should just end it, I said finally, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Maybe we're better off without each other. Melanie didn't flinch. She just nodded, her jaw tight. Fine, let's get a divorce. And that was it. Years of marriage, a decade of memories, all reduced to one angry, impulsive decision. I could barely wrap my head around it as she walked out again, this time for good. I wanted to chase after her, to fix things, to take back every stupid word. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling like the ground had disappeared beneath me. What followed was a blur of legal crap. Lawyers, asset division, paperwork. We split everything. The house, the savings, the stuff we collected over the years. And if you think that sounds clinical and easy, you'd be dead wrong. Every meeting felt like tearing open a wound. There were days when I'd leave the lawyer's office and just drive around for hours, not knowing where to go, my head spinning with all the what-ifs and regrets. Our friends? Well, they all picked sides just like I expected. Some rallied behind me, saying I was right to stand up for myself, that Melanie had pushed me too far. Others sided with her, calling me an asshole for the way I'd handled things, saying I'd gone too far with Samantha. It was like our entire social circle had been split down the middle, and suddenly everyone had an opinion on our marriage, like it was some reality show they could judge from a safe distance. And there was Melanie, of course, living her own life, far away from me. Last I heard, she'd moved in with the guy from the restaurant. Guess it wasn't just casual after all. She stopped reaching out, stopped trying to talk things out, like she'd finally found what she was looking for, and I was just the old baggage she'd shed. Part of me felt a weird relief, like at least she wasn't pretending anymore. But another part of me, the part that remembered the good times, the part that still loved her despite everything, that part felt like it was dying. Starting over was rough. I moved out of the house. It felt tainted with too many memories, too much pain. I got a small apartment across town, far enough to not run into Melanie, but close enough that I couldn't completely forget she existed. I threw myself into work, tried to keep busy, to keep moving forward. But no matter how hard I tried to build a new life, the ghosts of the old one followed me everywhere. Every corner of that apartment felt empty. Every weekend stretched on forever, and I couldn't help but think about the life we'd had before it all fell apart. There were nights I'd scroll through my phone, staring at old photos, vacations, holidays, random moments of happiness. I'd wonder how the hell we'd gotten to this point, how we went from two people who couldn't keep their hands off each other to two people who could barely stand to be in the same room. And then I'd shove those thoughts down, try to focus on anything else, anything to keep from drowning in that pool of regret. I did see Samantha a few times after that night, but it wasn't the same. The passion, the excitement, it faded. She was a great distraction, don't get me wrong, but she wasn't who I wanted. She wasn't Melanie, and she knew it. Eventually, we drifted apart, and I didn't try to stop it. Maybe it was for the best. I needed time to heal, to figure out who the hell I was outside of that marriage, and dragging her through my mess wasn't fair. So here I am now, trying to pick up the pieces and figure out how to live this new life, this life without Melanie. Some days it feels like freedom, like a weight has finally been lifted off my shoulders. Other days, it feels like I'm walking through a haze, unsure of where I'm going, unsure if I'll ever really be okay again. But if there's one thing I know, it's that this isn't the end. The story's not over yet. And maybe, just maybe, there's still something good waiting for me on the other side. When I left town after the divorce, it felt like tearing off a Band-Aid. Painful, but necessary. I moved to a new city, started a fresh job, and just focused on living my own life for the first time in years. The new job wasn't anything special, but it was solid and it gave me structure. I found myself with free time I didn't know what to do with. So I tried everything: hiking, running, hitting the gym. It was like rediscovering who I was without the weight of a toxic marriage dragging me down. Samantha and I met up a few times, but it didn't take long to realize that whatever we had was built on shaky ground. She was great, but I knew I wasn't ready to dive into anything serious. Too much baggage, too much healing left to do. So we went our separate ways without much fuss. Nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake thinking about Melanie, but not the Melanie I fought with. More like the woman I married, the one who made me laugh and who I once couldn't imagine living without. But I had to keep reminding myself that it was over, that she was gone for good, and that was a choice we both made. Eventually, those thoughts stopped hurting so much. They just became background noise. And I came to understand something. Revenge was empty. It felt great in the moment, but afterward, all it did was deepen the wounds. It didn't bring relief or peace. It just passed the anger back and forth, leaving me as stuck as before. When I let go of that, when I stopped waiting for closure or apologies that would never come, I felt lighter. For the first time in forever, I was free. Free from the lies, the drama, the constant struggle. I'm not going to pretend it's all sunshine and rainbows now. There are days I still feel that pang of regret, that urge to look back. But I know better than to let it pull me down. I'm moving forward day by day and figuring out what happiness looks like on my own terms. I'm not chasing after anything or anyone, just living my life and learning to be at peace with who I am. And that's more than enough for now.